So I was working on a new deck and I was trying to make a deck around the Gitrog monster. Golgari is probably one of my favorite color combinations in the game, and I really like landfall as a strategy in Commander. But I was looking to make a little bit of a higher power version of the Gitrog monster, still with more budget options, with a budget of around $200 total deck value. So I'm going through the list, and of course I want to add all the different tools that Gitrog really likes. I want to be able to sacrifice my lands. I want to be able to recur my lands and play them from my graveyard, play more lands on my turn, ramp, have a bunch of lands in the whole deck total, and have a little bit of landfall payoff. Since I was going higher power, I decided to put in a few combos or some big mana spells in there to really kind of help me win the game in case my board state didn't actually get there. So I went in with the best intentions possible of just making a higher power Gitrog deck with a pretty low budget too. So when I was finished, I decided to do what I normally do, and that was to start some test hands. So as I'm going through some test hands, I'm realizing that the deck is very, very good. Like, insanely good. As in, I am presenting turns in the Goldfish where I am drawing through most of my deck through sacrifice and recursion loops of my lands. I'm sacking them, I'm bringing them back, I'm sacking them again, I'm making more mana, and then I have either a huge board state from my token makers, or I can just win the game through my Chain of Smog combo. Keep in mind the total price for the deck is still pretty low. I still have plenty of removal in it. I'm still following most of the principles that I preach on this channel, but the deck is just insanely good. This is when I realized that the Gitrog monster is what I like to call a Purgatory Commander. What is a Purgatory Commander? A Purgatory Commander is what I like to call commanders that are a little bit too powerful for casual or even high power, but when you try to convert them to more of a CDH deck, they also don't necessarily fit well enough in that format either to compete with the rest of those decks. Some good examples are the casual powerhouses of Edgar Markov, Krenko the Mob Boss, the Dragon, Heliod. All of these decks are extremely powerful and really can take over games simply because of how much synergy are just innately put into the commander, as well as the amount of support that they get from just cards in the format. So in short, they're basically too strong for casual, not strong enough for CEDH. Now, of course, the Gitrog monster has been used in CEDH before, and it's been a pretty good deck. But as that format has evolved, the Gitrog monster is not nearly as good as it used to be. Are you going to win games with it in CEDH? Obviously, yes. Is it going to be the most effective option you can use? Probably not. Let me give you two more examples. Edric, Spymaster of Tress, is an extra turns deck that is pretty fun to play. You play a bunch of unblockable creatures, you play some extra turns, and you win through combat damage through either a Finale of Devastation, or a Crater Hoof, or an Overrun. Any of these Overrun effects that are really effective. I actually have an Edric deck that I play at CEDH pods because in casual, it's just way too good. However, Edric doesn't necessarily compete very well with these other decks, as his play patterns are pretty obvious, quite easy to stop, and overall just are not as effective as other strategies in that power level. But at casual pods, extra turns are usually seen as very salty, and even without extra turns, the amount of cards that Edric draws you is just too overwhelming to compete with at a casual pod. Now, yes, Edric can draw your opponent's cards, but typically your deck is going to be a lot more suited to draw these cards and utilize these cards that you're drawing than your opponents are. One last example would be Narset, the Enlightened Master. Narset is still pretty decent in CEDH pods, but not nearly as oppressive as she used to be in the meta. Similar to Gitrog, cards and commanders have just come out that are just a bit more effective at either doing what they want to or just winning in a more efficient way. So Narset usually wins through extra combats and extra turns, and having something like that again at a casual pod is just not really gonna fly. The biggest weakness of Narset is again that she's easy to counter, but in casual pods, counter spells and interaction like that is not typically run as often. So Narset will most likely resolve, and with hexproof built in, she will almost always stay in the table. Being able to cast so many free spells in a casual pod is again just going to get you so much further ahead than your opponents, even if you're not running extra turns or extra combats. Getting to run free, expensive spells is going to be insane no matter what pod you're in. However, in CEDH, she's not nearly as effective as she used to be. So what's the problem with Purgatory Commanders? There are quite a few problems with Purgatory Commanders. The biggest one most definitely being the playability of these commanders. Since they don't really fit in casual pods or higher power pods, it's really hard to find a pod that they can actually play in. You need to play in pods with almost other Purgatory Commanders or with very clear intentions stated in the pre-game talk. Purgatory Commanders are also almost on a scale where no matter the budget put into them, they're going to compete at the same level no matter what. The budget restriction is definitely one of the biggest indicators of whether a commander is a Purgatory Commander or is not a Purgatory Commander. With most commanders, it is possible to find more and more upgrades for each of their decks. Let's say you're making tokens in Naya, there are better options that are more expensive and more efficient than the ones that you're probably running. There are better overrun effects that you might be running to win the game. There are better, cheaper, more efficient, and faster bits of mana ramp or ramping in general that can help you get to where you need to be faster. All of these are very, very clear upgrades that you can put into your decks that will make them run better. However, with Purgatory Commanders, their best strategy is not restricted by a budget. Most of their strategies work effectively as long as you have the cards needed for that, and that would basically be all the budget that you need. Can fast mana get you there a little bit quicker? Maybe. Can rituals and tutors get you there faster? Maybe. But not much change is actually needed with these decks in order to get them to run the strategy that they need. And the strategy that they need to run is usually very, very effective, budget or no budget. With my Edric deck, that was pretty inexpensive. The most expensive part of the deck was, of course, the extra turn spells. And even with that lower budget, it dominated casual pods. So I started playing him in CEDH pods. With this Gitrog deck, it's only $200, and it works just as effectively as its normal CEDH deck. Extra combats and extra turns will be the biggest budgetary restriction to the Narset deck, but once you get those, the deck kind of runs itself, and you don't need to put that much money into anything else. That is the biggest determining factor of Purgatory versus non-Purgatory commanders. They are in between, and they are borderline unplayable because of how offsetting they are, and they don't really fit in any of these pods very well. That is my number one issue. The thing that actually sticks out to me about Purgatory Commanders is that for some reason, I can't get enough of them. I love playing my Edric deck in CEDH pods because although he's not the greatest strategy ever, I love the play patterns of Edric. And same with Gitrog. While I don't have the deck yet, I already love the play patterns of Landfall, and I love being able to draw so many cards and just being able to combo off and almost storm off in something like Golgari is awesome. And same with Narset. Free spells are awesome. There's something about these decks that I really am intrigued by, even if they're in the unfortunate position that they are. But back to the main point, trying to find a solution for these commanders. Because I like playing these commanders, I need to find ways where I can actually play them. I love how they play the game, and I love how effective they are at doing what they want to do. But I don't want to stomp casual pods with a deck that's just clearly better, and I also want to be able to compete relatively well at CEDH pods. So what can we do in order to actually play these decks properly? The first solution I would use is to run the deck exactly how it's supposed to be played, and in casual pods, just really harp on the rule zero, the fact that your deck is as strong as it is. Tell people and ask people to play their most powerful decks. Combos are good, basically no holds barred commander, but in a more casual setting. And in CEDH, just bite the bullet at the fact that you're playing a weaker deck. Now, the second solution I would actually say is to build the decks in a totally different way than what they're usually intended to be played as. For Narset, play her like a burn deck. Really powerful spells, plenty of board wipes in it, and a lot of group slug payoffs that usually cost a ton of mana. For Edric, play him as a group hug deck. Play a bunch of symmetrical effects that allows everybody to accelerate their game and kind of just cause chaos everywhere. And with Gitrog, while this is pretty similar to how he normally plays, just play Gitrog as a self-mill deck that will get value out of lands being in the graveyard, but just don't run nearly as much land and don't have any landfall payoffs. Those are my two solutions that I could think of for how you could actually play these commanders. I fully intend on probably buying this Gitrog deck in paper and playing it in my pod. My pod likes high power gameplay, so I know that it will be okay for me to play this deck in that pod. And I might actually ramp it up enough where I can play it in CEDH pods as well. With my Edric deck, I've already kind of bit the bullet and I never play it in casual. I only play it in CEDH. But going forward, this is how I think I'm going to be tackling this problem. What do you guys think? Can you think of any more Purgatory Commanders? What would your solution be to playing a Purgatory Commander? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching.